This is an oral history interview conducted for the Witness to War Serving a Nation project at Nauset Regional High School on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. For the sake of this interview, please state your full name and community in which you now reside.
Stephen Francis Sulkoski. I reside at West Yarmouth, Massachusetts.
Okay. What was your life like when you were younger?
Well, I joined the United States Navy in December of 1970 while I was a high school and a senior in high school. I started reserves and was in the Navy while I was attending my senior year in high school. And then upon graduation, I went to boot camp at Great Lakes. And then my first ship was the USS John R. Pierce, DD 753, for which I did 2 weeks on, and chipped paint and painted like everybody else. And then after that, I got my first assignment on the USS Intrepid, CVS 11, in which everybody does their mess deck duty, cleaning, washing dishes, painting. And then one day a lieutenant came down to me and asked me if I would like to work in the Air Operations Center up on the flight deck as an ATO, which is Assistant Air Transfer Officer, in which I was only an E3, but I got to work up with the Air Operations Center with the carrier control, air traffic controllers, and with them in my duty on the flight deck when I went up there was an Assistant Air Transfer Officer. As I worked in the Operations Center, I got to know all the pilots, the admirals, the ships, all the ship's officers, and everybody. It was a fantastic place to work for. Why? Because you knew everybody and you knew what was going on before others knew that were going on. But it was an experience. You get to take on a lot of responsibilities and so on. And one of my responsibilities was down below decks in the operations center was if somebody ran into trouble, I would have to get on the DRT board and make directions for the aircraft to go. I was 18 years old, and the first time my commander asked me, we have a plane that's in trouble, an A4 jet, and he needs to have the nearest distance to land. I had to draw that up. I told them 17 miles, 170 degrees. And he asked me, are you sure? And I said, I think so. Not the right answer. He got up, threw me against the wall, and said 17 miles, 170 degrees. He goes, you're correct. I said I was right. He goes, no. He said, you thought. He goes, am I supposed to tell this person? Steve thinks. So if he's wrong, goodbye $6 million aircraft, goodbye you. He told me, you don't think you know. Big lesson. 18 years old, I wasn't ready. A lot of responsibility. It was very, very dramatic.
When did you realize that you wanted to be in the Navy?
Well, my father was in the Army, Some friends of ours went up in 1969. We went to the Worcester Airport where they had the space capsule. And we went up and visited that. And they had the armed forces up there, recruiters. And of course, I wanted to go in the Army because my father was in the Army. Walked a little further down, and one of the the Navy recruits said, "Why are you going in the Army? Go into the Navy. If you go into the Navy, you're going to see the world. Mm-hmm. You go into the Army, you're not going to see the world." So I joined the Navy, and I saw 13 different countries and traveled the world. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Well, we watched a video, a 20-minute movie. That's why we're kind of behind. Sorry. I thought I heard you knocking, but I thought that might have been the UPS guy. Well, he'll just drop it
you're
off.
doing the pictures of you, and you're not in it?
No, we're
doing
filming.
the interview. Well, I know, but I thought you were doing like a TV interview where you were like,
We're
right
not
next.
allowed to be here.
Okay.
You just messed the whole thing up.
It's okay.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. Okay.
So that was why I joined the Navy.
Could you tell us a little bit about what you did for this?
I know you did that, didn't I?
Yeah.
You want me to repeat it, or?
Yeah, because we didn't get to get it on the video, so.
Yeah. Like I said, when I joined the Navy, I started off like everybody else, chipping and painting, and then eventually ended up working for the Air Operations Center, which I didn't think I was capable of, but I was asked and I went. And they asked me to work on the flight deck as the assistant air transfer officer, which I got a flight deck pay and I got 2-grade pay higher. So of course I took that job, which got me to know the pilots, the flight deck crew, the captain, the admiral, and so on. It's like a bond. We all know each other. And being in the operations center, you get to know where you're going before anybody else, what's going on, and so forth. My duties were up there to, if you were coming in on the ship from anywhere else, a helicopter or by plane, I would go out and escort you on the flight deck while they were having flight operations in for your safety, into the flight deck, into the deck. And if you were going out, I would tell you how to put on your life preserver and give you an explanation of what windows to kick out and what to do on the plane if it crashed. And I would escort you onto the plane and seat you in the plane and put your seatbelt on. And if any dignitaries that came over, Queen of England, she came over, I got to escort her off with other people. President of France, saw a lot of dignitaries. That's what I did up on the flight deck. And below deck, I had to stand behind the operations officer and write on the board backwards so he could see what planes were up in the air, who the pilots were, if they were up, down, what their fuel status was. And so he could read that, and I had to wear headphones with combat information in one ear, the pilot speaking in another ear, and converse with him. And That's where I gave up smoking. There's no time to smoke. You lit a cigarette, one tooth, trying to make everything work and writing backwards. I got to quit smoking. And that was a very, very traumatic job.
What was your most vivid memory from while you were serving?
Well, we lost one of our flight deck personnel one day. We had an A4 taking off, and the A4 slipped on its takeoff, broke away, and pinned Richard Urban under its wing, went over the side with the aircraft. The pilot punched out, landed on the deck. We had our rescue team to go out, and we had a Russian trawler behind us that we tried to get hold of, and we knew his call signs to try and get him to get our sailor out of the water. And we sent our people out, and the only thing we saw was his green jacket in the water and numerous sharks. We looked for him for 10 hours and beyond the limit. We never found him. And that was a memory I'll never forget.
Could you describe your typical day at work?
My typical day, we were being in operations. We were very fortunate that we had air-conditioned quarters. We'd get up in the morning with the ship's bells, and I would go to the operations center, and I had to go to all the ready rooms and give the pilots all their the ready line, their sequence in which they were going to line up on the deck, in what order they would take off. And then I would go back to the operations center and stand behind the status board and wait for the operations to begin. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I would write all the pilots' names down backwards and everything so that my commander could see, the operation commander, and write everybody's fuel status down, which would be 4.0. And then as the pilots were taking off, I would put a line up, they're taking off, and when they come down, they call in, you write their fuel status down. They come around, come back, you put a line down, means they're on deck. If they would refuel, we would do in-air refuelings, and the DRT board, if needed, I would write down a steer if anybody came into any trouble. Had to write the weather down for the commander. So the commander of operations depended on me, and the air controllers would depend upon me. And that was pretty much my everyday job there. And if anybody came in or mail came in, I would be relieved, and I would go up on the flight deck and take the post office people with me and take all the mail or cargo off the ship, off the plane, and bring it onto the ship, go down the elevators, make sure everybody was safe. And that was pretty much a daily routine, pretty much every day, night ops, day ops, all the time.
Could you tell us one of your happiest moments?
One of my happiest moments, I think, was going back to the United States. And when we would go out, we left the first time we went out, I believe we went to the Mediterranean, North Atlantic. We went to the North Atlantic, and that was, I believe, a 7 or 8 month deployment. And then when they told us we were coming home, it was yippee. You know, get to see all my friends and my family again. The unfortunate part was only 2 weeks. Then we were back out for the Mediterranean. But happy part is always going home.
Was the transition coming home easy or hard for you?
It was pretty, it was pretty easy. It wasn't too hard. Time went fast. When you're trying to do everything I was trying to do in the job I had, the time passed extremely fast. But coming back home, it was no big transition. Because again, I worked on the carrier, and our duty was we were an anti-submarine warfare group, so we weren't involved in bombing Vietnam or having fighter pilots come back from Vietnam all shot up. So we were just chasing submarines, Russian submarines, so it wasn't a bad transaction. It was just that one part that we lost one sailor, but other than that, the transaction was not too bad.
Did you make any friends in the Navy that you're still in touch with today?
I made a lot of friends in the Navy. On that carrier, being the title that I had, the Assistant Air Transfer Officer, you get to know everybody. And the big part was when the mail was coming in, everybody knew you. I would go down into the mess decks and you're like a VIP. Everybody comes up to you, hey, Ski. They call me Ski instead of Steve because my name was Sulkoski. They call you Ski, they get your nickname. When's mail coming in? When's mail coming in? You know, you need some new shoes? I work in supplies. When's the mail coming in? But I never really kept in touch with anybody, but now and today you have internet, and I just got in touch about 6 months ago with one of the air controllers I worked with, and Dan Delaney, and we got to talk, and how unfortunate we both have the same memory of when our fellow airman died, but that's a heck of a thing to have to remember. But I got to talk to him, but I've never seen any of the guys since then, which I got out in 1973.
Where was your favorite place that you got to visit?
I liked going to England. When I was on, I worked with one of the guys I worked with. He was from England, so I got to pen pal a girl in England and her family. So I had 1 week off when we got to England, and I spent the whole week at their house, in which they took me all over. They, everywhere. It was like having a private sightseeing person, and I got to stay at their house for the week. And England was a very nice place to visit. Spain was a great place to visit. Italy, I had relatives in Italy that my grandmother set me up with, that which I didn't know. They owned many hotels, ski resorts, mountains, and that was really fantastic. But those three are pretty much the best places I liked.
If you could have chose another job on the ship, what would it have been?
I don't think there would have been any other job that I would have taken other than that. The one I had, I was very, very blessed and very fortunate to get that job, but I would say a weatherman would have been a pretty cool job. That would have been something that you could use when you got out. But I would probably say maybe a weatherman.
Were you sad to leave the Navy behind once you left?
Oh, yes. I would have re-enlisted in a heartbeat. But when I got out, I got the sad news that our ship was going to be decommissioned. And they wanted to send me to A school to be an air controller, air traffic controller, and I refused it because I knew I couldn't come back to my ships and my shipmates, and it would have been totally different for me, so I refused it. If that ship had stayed commissioned, I probably would have made a career out of it.
How many ships did you work on?
My first ship was the John R. Pierce DD 753, and then I served on the Intrepid, USS Intrepid, for a year and a half. And then I went to reserves. In reserves, you have to go and do 2 weeks of active duty. I did the USS Denobla and the USS Nesplin. And the Nesplin, I believe, was an AOG, and the other one was a cargo ship.
Which was your favorite to work on?
The carrier. Absolutely.
If you could have... Oh, you said you would have come back? What made you choose the Navy over the other branches?
Well, we talked about that earlier. It was the fact that I could see the world in the Navy, not in the Army.
What was it like keeping in touch with your family while you were enlisted?
My family, I would keep in touch. I started with letters, and then we went to cassette tapes. And it's funny you mentioned that. About 6 months ago, my father sent me a bunch of cassette tapes that were I had just listened to. And it's kind of strange because 45 years ago, and I was talking to my sister, asking her how she was, and he would tell me how the family's doing there. And as I'm making recordings, you can hear the bells ringing, and at one time we got taken away at general quarters, But I did a lot of cassette tapes, and to listen to those was really kind of funny because I remember saying, I believe it was, I made $175 every 2 weeks. And I remember, and it's funny, I remember telling my father that, and he said, well, spend your money. And at home I was working at Nissan Bakery before I went into the service. And he said, we just got a big raise, big contract. He said, we just got a big 3 cents an hour raise. And it was like, woo, a lot of money. But it was, we contacted most of the time by cassettes.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about your time in the military?
No, it was quite an experience. I wish that everybody could experience it. It definitely teaches you how to be independent and be on your own, and how to deal with people and so on. I have photo albums here that we can look at later, and some movies if you want to put a couple of clips of those in there.
Okay.